Well, thank you very much, everyone, for being here today, and Dan for inviting me to participate here today. As you heard, I work for Volvo Group. I'm based in Washington, D.C., and I've been with the Volvo Group for about 10 years. Most of you know Volvo as a Swedish-based company, and that is our global headquarters. But I work for Volvo Group North America, which is headquartered in North Carolina. And I'm looking forward to spending the next hour or so with you to kind of share a little bit about some of our experience bringing ZEVs into the marketplace in the United States, and answering any questions that you might have. It's a really exciting time to be working in the transportation sector, and there's a lot of good work that's going on. It's challenging, but that also adds to the fun. So just quickly, just a minute of introduction. As I mentioned, I'm working with Volvo Group North America, not in Sweden. The United States, or North America broadly, is a very important market for Volvo Group. It actually accounts for about 30% of our sales, and you can see we have about 17,000 employees in North America. You can see by the map that we're principally an East Coast based company. And all up and down, and you see on the bottom of the screen we have a number of our brands there. I should say that we are not in the light duty sector. Volvo Cars is a completely separate company, so we are only on the heavy duty side, and until very recently we were only in North America on the heavy duty side at kind of class 8, 7, and 8 vehicles. But recently our Mack truck brand has launched a medium duty truck, a class 6 truck. So, but generally speaking, we're talking about the large class 8 vehicles. But we're also in construction equipment, in buses, both motor coach and transit buses, and Volvo Penta, which does industrial engines and marine engines. We're very proud of the fact that we are the only heavy duty truck group that manufactures all of our North American product in the United States. So with that, let me move on to the point of today. And I'm wondering, are you seeing this little screen here? I'm wondering how I can. I don't know how to. I don't know if you're seeing.
We only can see your slide.
Okay, fine, because I have the thing here. I just wanted to double check. So as I mentioned, this is a very exciting time, and Volvo Group in particular has made a number of key commitments. We have always recognized, well, I should say, we've always had a very strong commitment to the environment, and environmental care has been one of our core values for many years. And we've always recognized that transportation plays a significant role in challenging the environment, and that we have a responsibility to have our vehicles, both our own operations, but our products, be as clean as possible. Last year, we made a commitment that we would be moving to a 100% fossil-free product offering by 2040. And as an interim goal there, we are setting to be 35% ZEVs, or electric vehicles, by 2030. When I say ZEVs, I'm talking about both battery electric and fuel cell vehicles. But we certainly are moving faster right now on the battery electric than we are the fuel cell. But we have a lot going on in the fuel cell area as well. In fact, we, together with our competitor Daimler, have formed a joint venture, Cellcentric, that is looking to develop fuel cell technology, and we anticipate having fuel cell vehicles on in the marketplace more in the second half of this decade. Here you can see a little bit more detail about kind of our vision going forward. And you can see here that, basically we see the role of the combustion engine declining over time. And largely that is going to be replaced with a mix of battery electric and fuel cell electric vehicles. Now you can see it's very non-specific here because time will tell, what percentage of the marketplace can be filled by battery electric versus fuel cell electric. There's a lot of factors that I'll get into a little later in my presentation that are really beyond our control. So it's really difficult, if not impossible, to predict now. But we can say is that we don't expect the complete elimination of the internal combustion engine, because we do believe that there will be some applications that just may be too difficult to transfer to battery electric or fuel cell. And in that case, we see that they will be internal combustion engines using some form of renewable fuel. So, so this is just a representation of our pathway. Certainly natural gas is playing a role in here, but that is a small percentage and probably continuing a shrinking share as we go forward. This slide is meant to be more illustrative. The basic takeaway from this is to show that we're going to get to a large percentage of the market being electric. And here, I mean, I'm talking specifically about battery electric. And the point being that, depending on the application, it's going to vary how quickly that transition is going to happen. When you're talking about distribution vehicles and delivery vehicles and urban applications and waste refuse vehicles, that's going to happen quicker than it will in the long haul sector, for example. And so, so the transition will happen at different speeds based on segment. It will also vary based on market and regions. Certainly, we expect Europe and the United States to kind of be in the forefront, and it will take longer for us to make this shift in other parts of the world, but we certainly intend to get there. What I want to, I'm going to talk about this slide for a few minutes. It's a very busy slide, so I'm going to try and unpack it for you. Basically, what this slide is kind of encapsulating is a project that we are very proud of and have been very actively working on for the last several years in California, called the Volvo Lights Project. And this is it's the largest publicly funded project that Volvo has been involved with globally in our history. It's also just shy of being the largest one that the California Air Resources Board has ever funded. It's virtually equal to the largest one. And the point of this project is to really bring battery electric trucks and equipment in the goods movement sector into the marketplace, and to kind of a commercial pilot, if you will. You can see that it is includes a number of project partners, and that's one of the probably most unique aspects of this project, in the sense that it really involves a whole, they say it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to bring electric vehicles to market. Gone are the days when new technology can be integrated into a vehicle and we just introduce it in the next model year and, wash our hands of it. We now, we're talking about a whole paradigm shift in the transportation world. And so this is something that is much larger, that involves, active support and transition and effort on behalf of a lot of different players. So in this project, we've tried to look at all the different players that need to be involved here. So you can see that the project was funded, I mentioned, by the California Air Resources Board, and we're working together with the South Coast Air Quality Management District in California. This map that you see is part of this, is Southern California. You can see in the map there the Port of Los Angeles and Long Beach. That can kind of help you frame the, where we are in the world. And that is meant to be the scope of the project. But in terms of project partners, certainly you have the fleets that are using these vehicles. You have a dealership that is involved. We have the ports are playing a role in the project, the utility, Southern California Edison. We have electric vehicle, the charging infrastructure folks involved as well. We have community colleges involved that are doing training, and I'll speak to that in a moment here. And we also have an organization, Reach Out, which is really a community development organization, and their role is to really try and educate the population about this transition. I'm sure folks are aware of well, it's controversy, but also, how prevalent the transportation industry is and goods movement industry is in Southern California. The ports of LA and Long Beach take in about 40% of all goods imports coming into the United States. And so the role of truck traffic and goods movement is huge. And there's a lot of concern and frustration about the growing levels of truck traffic, the environmental and air quality issues. And there's a strong demand to move as quickly as possible to electric vehicles. And so Reach Out has been working to try and help explain to the community what is going on in this project, what they can expect, how long it's going to take, what are the transition points along the way. And then across the bottom of the slide, you see some of the goals of the project. The intention was to bring 23 battery electric heavy duty trucks into commercial operation, where that actually is 25. It's grown a bit. And it's not just the trucks. We are looking at goods movement equipment in the warehouses. So we have forklifts and yard goats in the two fleet warehouses. There is a component on renewable energy. The two fleets have installed solar panels on their warehouse roofs. I mentioned before about the community colleges that are involved in doing training. And certainly then the ports that are looking at this and what is going to be needed as they try and transition to having more electric vehicles in their operating in their environment. So this project has been going on since 2018. Actually, it didn't officially kick off really until 2019, but and we're coming to the conclusion of the project now. It will officially end by the end of Q1 next year. So it has taken a long time, and I'll share some more detail about why that is the case and what some of the lessons learned from this project are. As thanks to this project, we've been able to prove the technology, prove its effectiveness in certain applications, tweak and really make the technology ready for prime time. And we've come to the point that we have already launched these vehicles in the marketplace. You can purchase a Class 8 electric VNR model truck in the United States from Volvo. We made that launch. We did our launch just about a year ago now, almost to the day. And this current truck has a range of up to 150 miles. I will say range is very flexible, or malleable is not the right word, but it can vary. It all depends on so many factors in terms of everything from the weather and to driver performance to what the weight of the load being hauled is. So there are a lot of factors that go into that, but that's a general rough estimate. And we have multiple fleets using these trucks in California today. When you saw the list of partners on the previous slide, it showed the two companies you can see here, DHE and NFI, who are formal partners in the project, who are taking multiples of these trucks into their operations. However, there are several other fleets that are taking them on a lease basis. The point of the project was to also have some vehicles that other fleets could lease and integrate and kind of try them out and learn from them and understand how their operations would be impacted by utilizing electric trucks. And so these are some of the other companies that are utilizing these vehicles in their operations. This whole project is in Southern California. So they're all operating in California, but you can see here that we do have Manhattan Beer was the company that was our first a customer that purchased these vehicles on the East Coast in New York. So we are beginning to have sales around the country, but obviously it's limited in terms of where they can go, because the environment has to be prepared for them in many ways. In addition to these trucks, Volvo is looking across our entire product portfolio on where we can move towards greater electrification. And so one other example is with our Mack brand, which is a very dominant player in the refuse segment. And so our Mack Trucks brand has introduced into the marketplace an all-electric refuse truck. You can see it here. The very first 2 commercial pilots into operation. One went to New York City Department of Sanitation. It's one of Mack is the prime supplier for New York City sanitation. It has one of the most grueling and difficult and demanding duty cycles that you can put a refuse truck to. And then also Republic Services, which is a major customer of ours and a refuse operator in the United States. And so we have a truck operating in a slightly more rural or suburban application out in North Carolina. In addition to trucks, we also have, we are making progress on electrification of our construction equipment. And this slide is showing the first 2 pieces of construction equipment, a urban excavator and kind of a mini wheel loader that just recently concluded a commercial pilot project in Southern California as well. Actually, this was funded by the US EPA together with the same air district. They were not, these pieces of equipment were in operation in 3 different customer operations. There was an event just a couple months ago where some of the findings of that project were announced. And these vehicles are also along with the refuse truck, I should have mentioned, and these pieces of equipment are all for sale now. You can take orders. These can be delivered in 2022, so which is literally around the corner. And we are in the process of also doing the next set of commercial pilots with some of the next larger models in these same applications. The one common point that's important that I will touch on as we go forward is that all of these pieces of equipment, they have to do the same job as their diesel equivalents. And while they're exactly the same in many respects, they are not in terms of the price. They are much more expensive, as one might expect. And yes, those prices will come down in time, but it's really important now that public funding and incentives are made available to help operators integrate these into the marketplace, into their fleets, and to help build the volume to get these prices down over time. So let me spend the next maybe 10 minutes or so talking about different aspects of the Volvo Lights project. I'll go back to that because that has, it's been such a unique project, and we've learned so much in so many different areas from that project. And the first issue is in terms of repair and maintenance. I mentioned before that we really are facing a paradigm shift in the whole trucking industry as we transition to this new technology. And so we really need to prepare the environment. We can't just plop these new trucks down and expect them to operate. They're very different than a diesel truck. I said they have to be the same in terms of their performance, but obviously the technology is different. And then even how you service and repair them obviously is going to be different. It takes, there needs to be special training for mechanics and even salespeople to know how to sell them, how to talk about them, how they will be utilized in fleets. And so there's a lot of training that is necessary. And through the Lights project, we've worked together with the community colleges, 2 community colleges in Southern California. We've developed special curriculum and for folks to be certified mechanics and to certify their ability to work on them. Safety is a huge issue in the training and the technology and the understanding that's needed to work on these vehicles. And it's not just, obviously the people who work on them are important, but also even the people who are going to come into contact with them. And that includes the first responders. You know, it's we were talking before we got kicked off and before we kicked off this webinar, you know, backstage with some of the speakers, and we're talking about, you know, it's important to, you know, we were talking in the use of hydrogen, but here as well. I mean, if you know, these new technologies are different, and they pose risks, and they can be very safe, but they're safe provided people are aware of how they are different, how to manage them, how to operate them. And so we've been also, in addition to forming a training for mechanics and for salespeople, we've worked to do a first responder training so that they know how to respond if necessary in the case of a fire or other accident. So that was one key part of this project. I'll next go on to talk kind of broadly about lessons learned through it. There's just so many, and this just encapsulates some of the really high level lessons from the project. And in fact, we did write a paper, myself and another colleague wrote a peer-reviewed paper that was published as part of the EVS 33 conference, and which I can certainly make available to Dan, that can be shared, that goes into more detail about some of the lessons that we've learned from the Volvo Lights project. And that will be updated because, as I mentioned, the project isn't over yet, so there's still lessons coming. But I'd have to say that, you know, really if I had to try and broadly generalize the biggest lessons learned, you know, probably the single most important one is that the infrastructure to get these vehicles operating is very challenging. It takes more time than you might anticipate to get the infrastructure up and running. It's a very complicated process. And so because of that, we've learned that it's really important to engage the utilities early and the local officials early in the process of when fleets are wanting to move to using more electric vehicles. The other main takeaway is the cost of these vehicles. I've mentioned this before, they're extremely expensive. And people say that, well, the costs will come down, and they will come down. And there's a lot of discussion about how the maintenance is less expensive, and that's yet to be proven. We believe that to be so. But there's still some, you know, there's still more to be learned about that. But there's other aspects to the TCO that go into what, you know, fleets need to consider, and looking at the whole total cost of ownership, charging rates, and residual value of these vehicles. And so it's a very complicated process. And so because of that, they're going to be more expensive for some time. And so public funding is so important here. And it's really, I guess the last big point here I'll make from this slide is that regardless of where you are in this ecosystem, if you're working for a fleet, if you're working for the utilities, if you're working for local governments or national governments, you need to identify, you know, a dedicated point of contact. You know, to just think that you're going to integrate this transition into your normal staffing patterns is not wise. You know, we found that there's so many different players and so many different stakeholders involved, and everybody has their priorities, and it gets complicated. There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, you might say. And so it's really important that you identify either a department or a person to really be the lead and to really be a single point of contact. It will definitely help to simplify things going forward. I think I have two more slides here. Sorry, I'm two more slides here, and then I can happy to take questions. In this case, looking at what it means for the fleets themselves, because there are a lot of things that until you really dig down into the process and think about really integrating them into your operations, that might not even cross your mind that you need to think about. One of the things that we learned early on is that a big factor in a fleet's ability to move to electrification is whether they own their property or not, or whether they're leasing their property. A lot of fleets, have warehouses, they lease that property. And then if you're going to make a major investment of infrastructure there, you don't own the property to make the decisions on it. So you have to go to the owner of the property to get them to buy off, or you may be knowing that you're going to be moving soon. And so do you want to make the investment in that property, because it's a long-term investment, obviously, to install the infrastructure. Also, it is very complex in terms of the figuring out how these trucks can integrate into operations. There's considerations in terms of charging costs, and I'll just share with you that's a very complicated factor in and of itself. There are just in this lights project, we've learned that through the utility, there's summer charging rates and there's winter charging rates. There's peak and off peak and kind of mid peak, so and all of those rates are different. And then there's questions in terms of how is it going to affect your operations? Are you slip seating that soon as a vehicle is done, it's off with another driver again and there's no time to charge? Or does it come back to the depot and sit and have hours to charge? Do you need a fast charge, which can happen, or can you benefit from a slow charge? A slow charge might seem not as optimal, but yet it will have less wear and tear on your battery, and it will be a cheaper way to charge. So lots of things to think about as you're considering integrating these into the fleet. I mentioned before about the staff time and the skills that are required on the part of fleets. And you really find that you lose some control over your operations here, because you're at the mercy to some degree of the utility. You're at the mercy of local permitting authorities. You're at the mercy, depending on your operations, on what the next, what charging availability is there? Is there public charging available? Is it free? Is it or meaning versus being occupied? So lots of considerations and less kind of control over all aspects of your business. And then the final portion I'll mention, my last slide here, is talking about for the government to be thinking about, and the government entities here on the call. I'd have to say that the big message here is that it's really critical and incumbent upon the governments, if we want to meet those goals in terms of getting this technology in the marketplace and meeting our climate change goals, to make it as easy as possible for fleets to try out this technology and to use it. And so some of that is just the provision of public funding to help bring down the cost. I mentioned that before, and that's not just for the vehicles, but also for the infrastructure, but also make it easy for fleets to try and access that funding. This is something that we've been dealing with in California for some time, and they're actually starting to make some changes that in response to this. They have one funding program that is available that fleets can apply to reduce the cost of the vehicle. Then there's a separate program that the Energy Commission has to bring down the cost of the infrastructure. But then the utilities have their own programs to kind of bring down the make ready to not for the infrastructure itself or the charger itself, but the grid and the capability, the energy availability. Well, if a fleet has a business to run and they're not used to applying for government grants, and certainly if they have to go to different agencies that have different funds that may not be on the same time schedule, and they use one to order the truck, and then they need the infrastructure to be ready at the same time. but we're finding that the time needed to order, the advance time for getting a vehicle is much shorter than the time needed to install the infrastructure. And so it's really important for government entities, or it's helpful if they can provide the funding for kind of a project or as a package, certain funding that will go to, so many vehicles with so much infrastructure, and kind of the whole package. So kind of like a one-stop shop for fleets. And then it's really one of the other things that I'll just mention here is the importance of coordination between different government entities, not just in the providing of funding, but also in the priorities. Just again, one quick example from this Volvo Lights project. There was a part of the project was supposed to include the very first public heavy-duty charging station in Southern California, in the country actually. And a lot of work was done to pick a site, what made sense in terms of the location and so many factors. And then at the end, that charging location did not go forward because the local permitting authority did not allow it. Despite the fact that this project had the support of the state government, there's so much attention on accelerating ZEVs in the marketplace, but yet the local authorities were not on board, and there were some good reasons, but it's really important that all efforts are done to get different government entities all prioritizing or being clear at least what their considerations are and what needs to be factored into how these kinds of projects can move forward. So with that, there's certainly a lot more that I can say and talk about, but I'll leave that with the end of my presentation. And it's a great project. We've learned so much, and one of the goals we've had is to really try and share what we've learned, because we want everybody to succeed. We want the US to succeed. We want other countries to succeed. We want our competitors to succeed, because this transition isn't going to happen unless there's a volume of product coming to market. And certainly Volvo can't fill that in and of itself. So we see this as we're part of the village to make this transition happen. So thanks so much for inviting me to be here with you and to share some of this information.
Thanks a lot, Dawn. That was fantastic. I guess it's a short period of time to cover an incredible amount of detail. So thanks for that. We do have some questions in the Q&A, but I thought I might start off with one that I think you touched on early in your presentation, and it's really around, I think you had a table there showing the different applications for vehicles. Do you think going forward, and this is maybe a little bit of looking in your crystal ball, but it occurs to me that there might be more types of vehicle specific to different applications, as in sort of niche vehicles that have a sort of a more limited range of applications than you currently might say for an ICE or diesel vehicle. Does that make sense? I mean, I know there's a very big difference between hydrogen and electric, but it just occurred to me you had sort of the construction vehicles, and then you had sort of the long haul, long distance ones, and then the more urban environment vehicles. It just sounds like there might be more sort of models of truck to suit different applications.
Oh, well, yes. That was just a very simplistic kind of illustration. Obviously, the folks in the heavy duty market know that. I mean, it's hugely complex, especially when we get to vocational vehicles. I mean, there's everything from fuel tankers to auto haulers to different kinds of construction vehicles that are on road and off road, and so yeah, it's extremely complicated. And this is actually a point that we spend a lot of time educating policymakers about, because and to no fault of their own, it's not their industry, but they don't realize how complicated it is to electrify this sector, because there's so many differences in what these different vehicles do. And so I don't know if your question is in terms of, are there other technologies that are going to be needed? I mean, who knows what new things might come up, but I think we believe that, or at least we're committed to going to, we're not committed to, as I showed, just battery electric or just fuel cell or just renewable fuel. I mean, we don't know what that mix is going to be. I don't know if there's some even alternative to that. I mean, is there going to be, there's hybrid vehicles. It might not be all something. So maybe it's a electric, it's electric, but also it's a traditional hybrid, but the diesel is renewable diesel fuel that, but it's electric in some portions, or maybe it's renewable natural gas together with electric. I mean, we kind of have to see. I don't know if that answers your question, but
no, it kind of does. I guess I made an assumption that there might be more categories of vehicle, but it sounds like there's ample already. You could use short haul and the same truck for short and long haul, but it sounded like you might actually need two different vehicles to deal with both. But that's all right. We'll go on a question from the audience. Angus is kind of asking maybe specifically about the VNR truck, and if you have any indication of how it compares. Well, what do the competitors look like from a cost and performance perspective? Do you have any feel for that yet? As I guess it's been a year it's been available, but it doesn't sound like it's very pervasive in the market just yet.
Yeah, it's not. In terms of the competitor, now keep in mind I'm here in North America, so I'm not, and Volvo Group is farther ahead in Europe than they are in North America. So I can't speak to what the competitive landscape is in Europe, but I can tell you in North America, we are very proud to be the first major truck OEM to have product available in the marketplace, all electric Class 8 trucks. However, all of the traditional OEMs are moving in this space. Daimler is, with their Freightliner brand, is not far behind. And they also have trucks in commercial pilots right now. They'll be launching and going to commercial sale, I believe, sometime next year, second half of next year. Certainly in the US market, Navistar and PACCAR with their Peterbilt and Kenworth, we're all moving in this direction. And of course, there are lots of new entrants to the marketplace. We hear about, well, of course, there's BYD, there's Lion, there's Arrival, there's a lot of Tesla, of course. There's a lot of entrants there. But one of the things that's, one of the advantages, I mentioned the fact that we're the first traditional OEM, and why that's important is, we have a known history. We know how to make vehicles, how to do it on a large scale. And what's really important about, or unique from a traditional OEM rather than a startup, is that we have a vast dealer network around the country and that can support these vehicles that are in customer hands. And in fact, this was a point I was going to raise in my presentation. Because it's so complicated for fleets to think of all the different factors of integrating them, it really heightens the value and the importance of a dealer relationship. Somebody who has the experience of working with other customers and how this is going to impact operations, and to be able to help fleets figure this out. And so that's one of the benefits of a traditional OEM with a vast dealer network that can help. We like to say we're the first and the best, but we're all coming as a group in this space. And in terms of the pricing, it's I can't speak to what the other OEMs are charging for their vehicles. I will tell you that none of our vehicles have been purchased without public incentives. It is a prerequisite, really, because they're just so expensive. Fleets cannot afford them without some type of public funding.
So let's maybe not dig into that specifically, but about the total cost of ownership. And to be honest, you get different answers from depending upon who you talk to. And some will tell us that, even though they do cost more, the total cost of ownership is actually currently comparable. What have you learned from lights, if anything, or is it just still really a big unknown? Is it kind of an assumption that the total cost of ownership is still high for the battery electric vehicle?
I'll tell you, it's not an assumption. It's a fact that it is higher. And I could bring some of the fleets, ask them to tell you, and they could give you very specific reasons why. I mean, the cost of the upfront cost of the vehicle is at least twice the cost of a diesel vehicle. And in some cases, it's 3 times or more, depending on the type of vehicle. Refuse, for example, I mean, you've got massive costs of the body as well. And so, refuse trucks are more than twice the cost of their diesel equivalent. There's greater complications because of the complex bodies and the engineering that has to go into the vehicle spacing and packaging. But in terms of, nobody knows what the residual value of these vehicles are going to be. So, and a lot of fleets that adopt these vehicles, they'll keep them for a certain amount of time, 2-3 years, and then they're selling to a secondary market. Well, we don't know how that's going to play out. What is the status of batteries at that point? Are they going to need a replacement battery? How much life will be left with them? What's the value of that battery, even after it's swapped out? And does the fleet get that value? Who gets that? I mentioned before about the charging. The total cost of ownership. I will say that in some cases we see that total cost of ownership will come down faster than in others. But there's just so many factors. If you can slow charge, if you do A and B and C, and maybe it's going to be, it will come down quicker, but some of it we just don't know. But what we do know is that it's not there yet. And I would say I don't expect it to be equivalent in the next handful of years.
Fantastic. No, there was one more question there's actually quite a few questions, but we're probably going to run low on time. Another one, this might be a little bit crystal ball as well, that you might have a feel for, but it's an observation that at least initially, and potentially based on what you were just saying, that it's actually only going to be larger fleets that actually have the resources to, invest in the infrastructure and the vehicles that are going to be able to do this, potentially leaving smaller fleets at a disadvantage. I guess I don't know if that's a question or if you maybe had some thoughts around that. I guess it could become a reality.
This is a huge issue going on right now in California in particular. California has very aggressive goals to move to a zero emission fleet. They've particularly focused on the drayage sector because of the air quality issues and environmental justice concerns there. However, in the port of LA and Long Beach, although it's not unique to them, but a lot of the trucks going in and out of the ports are small operators. They have a handful of trucks. It's not the big guys, but you're right. The big guys are the ones that are more apt to have not just the money to invest, but also the resources to, go after this funding and to dedicate certain, routes to these trucks and go through the inconvenience that's going to be involved. And I can tell you that that the state of California is grappling right now, and they're trying to figure out how to structure programs to make it easier for the smaller fleets to get in. And in fact, a new RFP was just launched by the Port of LA a couple of weeks ago. And it's a struggle because, a lot of the big guys are the ones going in after it. It was meant to set up to try and help the smaller fleets, but it's really hard for those folks to do it. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. The California Air Resources Board and their public funding going forward, they're thinking about limiting the size of fleets that can access the incentive funding specifically as a way to help the smaller fleets. The problem, though, is that, a lot of those independent operators, a normal diesel truck in the US would be anywhere from $130,000 to $150,000, maybe $130,000. But a small operator is buying a used truck on the market, second, third owner, fourth owner for $40,000. So we need to have a second market developed for the electric vehicles. And that's only so that they can be less expensive for smaller operators. And that requires the major fleets to have them and then kind of turn them over. So it's not necessarily bad to have so much of this start out with the larger fleets.
Okay, so it sounds like you're kind of suggesting some mechanism of sort of ensuring that there is that secondary market and they do end up in the right hands that, you know, that really need them. Yeah, that'd be interesting. We've probably only got time for another question here. Quick one about the infrastructure around charge points. Due to the lights project, how much was installed, you know, 2018 versus today? And is there still a shortfall? Do you have any indication of sort of the charging infrastructure that went in as part of the project?
Yeah, so the two different fleets each have, I'm trying to think, I should know this. I was just at one of the fleets last week. I think they have 3 different chargers, but that's for the on-road vehicles. That's 150 kilowatt chargers, fast chargers. But then there's separate chargers for the freight handling equipment. You can't use the same charger for forklifts and yard goats that you use for the on-road vehicles. So there's other charging infrastructure that was there. There's actually massive kind of efforts to upgrade the grid near where the warehouse was. The total number of chargers, I want to say there were 29 total. I think it was on my slide there, and I should know this. I'm struggling a bit here, but I will say the other thing though is that I mentioned in the project that we have other fleets leasing the equipment, and so that's been a real experience too, because if you're just trying out the truck, you're not investing in putting in all these chargers. Some of the entities had the equipment, and so they made the investment to install it. Others were using mobile chargers, and the problem is with mobile chargers, they don't charge it as fast or with as much power or as much energy, and so they're not as kind of efficient for the fleets to use. So.
Great. So yeah, we're out of time. I'm going to ask 2 quick questions. I think you kind of already answered one. And I was going to ask about the construction equipment and it requiring different infrastructure, because I guess it's going to be in different places all the time. But I think you kind of answered that with regard to the other vehicles within the warehouses as well. They require a different set of infrastructure.
Well, and I think there'll be more use of mobile chargers. There's also in some cases where we're seeing actually tethered plug-in. Literally, you know, if an excavator, you know, there can actually be a cord that plugs into the kind of the grid in a sense, because, you know, if you've got a huge excavator, it's not moving anywhere. It's stationary. So you can actually draw from the grid directly. But in other cases, yeah, these smaller things, they're all over the place. And so, you know, you really need mobile chargers.
Great. Were either of the companies involved generating their own energy, or was all Edison that was providing it from the grid?
Well, actually now both of the fleets in the lights project are installing solar panels on their warehouse roofs. One that's complete. They are already drawing down the power from those panels and using it in the trucks. The other major fleet, that installation is just being completed now. So they're not there yet, but they're getting there.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for your time, Dawn. I know we've gone over time and you have other places to be. Really appreciate you being here today.